You are now inside the trenches with former national champion and Super Bowl champion, Marlon Favorite. Marlon will give you in-depth insight on some of the top stories in the world of sports with a little Southern flavor. Here's your host, Marlon Favorite.
What's happening, beautiful people? Welcome back to Inside the Trenches, the podcast, man. We have a brand new show here. I'm super excited for my next guest. I've been knowing him for 20 plus years, not telling either of our ages. Hello, somebody. But my next guest is the founder of TigerBait.com, none other than not Mr. Brother, because look, we got to stop that one. Me too, man. Them youngsters be calling me Mr. Now, call me Fave. Coach Fave, good enough. I have my good buddy, Mike Scarborough, on the show, baby. What's up, Mike?
I'm doing good, Marlon. You know, you talk about the whole Mr. Mike thing, and it's like, you know, what's wild about this particular class of 2022, and we're going to talk recruiting, is now I'm covering guys, kids, Walker Howard at St. Thomas More. All right. Well, I started covering recruiting a little bit past when Jamie Howard, his daddy, was a quarterback at LSU. Ben Bordelon's son, Bo, at Newman, is committed to LSU, offensive lineman. You know, Ben was at that same time period as Jamie. You know, so we're now starting to see former LSU players that, you know, it started coming around where now it's their kids and their sons that are coming up. And it's like, boy, you realize, man, not only is time flying, but yeah, you're getting old.
And I'm right there with you, Mike. Working with LSU Sports Network, talking to guys like John Emery and Jamar Chase, I feel very comfortable because I can relate to him. I listen to Young Boy. I listen to, Lil Baby. So we're cool, but I have to remember, man, you're in your 30s. These guys are just touching their 20s. So, it's a bit different. They may say, sir, or Mr. every once in a while. So that is an interesting piece.
But, that is an important piece, though, because, it's one of the things coming out of COVID that I think college coaches are missing. You know, the in-person conversation and with recruits and them looking a coach in the eye and the character, just the things that you can pick up on a kid's character. That stuff has been missing with the lockdown and recruits being unable to go to college campuses and sit across from a desk from a coach, and a coach being able to size them up and see, what the character is of a kid. And we're about to get through that. I think that we're about to get an announcement. I don't know what the holdup is, but June 1st, I think we're going to start having college camps. Unofficial and official visits will start back this summer. So I think that's a vital part of the recruiting process. So when a kid goes and says yes, sir, and no, sir, to a coach, that kind of stuff matters, I believe, in the recruiting process. And I think we're going to find out in the next couple of years that because of those in-person interactions didn't take place, how many is there going to be recruiting classes that have a little bit more misses than they would have had otherwise.
Yeah, and you make a good point with that, because it makes me think about what this class of 2020 and 2021 had to deal with, from the recruiting piece, from the pro day. Luckily for a guy like Joe Burrow and Justin Jefferson, excuse me, at least those guys had that entire 2019 film, and then they were able to participate in the combine before we went into the pandemic. So that helped them out. Whereas these guys, such as not so much Jamar Chase, and we'll get into the LSU Pro Day, which is happening this week, and also those guys getting ready for the actual draft coming up at the end of this month. They didn't have those opportunities. There's some guys that opted out. And there was also some guys that just didn't, that meant something. Like, again, like a guy like Jamar Chase, he's okay because the tape from 2019 will take care of everything. Whereas guys like Tyler Shelvin and Kerry Vincent, those guys really could have used the season, but also they could have used those in-person interviews. Never forget my NFL Combine experience. Because of a knee injury, I couldn't do the 3-cone drill, run the 40. So I had to put all my chips on interviewing, sitting down with the teams, them being able to look me in the eye, shake my hands, ask me questions, read my body language to see that I'm telling the truth, and also get a feel for the personality. That helped. That made Carolina fall in love with me and eventually draft me. Bring me in as a high priority undrafted free agent. So to your point, My son, he's Kentrell. He's class of 22, punter, probably one of the best punters in the state, and a receiver this year with a new staff. Me and my wife, we were just talking about this. Good thing that his class is 2022 because this is an important season.
No doubt. Now, you bring up him as a punter. Will he be doing any of the sailor stuff in the summer or this spring? Is there kicking camps that he's going to be involved in?
Well, we're doing a kick punt pass here in New Orleans. I partnered with Sam McMahon and Elite Football out in Baton Rouge. We're going to do that tentatively. You know, we're kind of paying attention to Corona as well. End of April, somewhere in May after spring ball. So he's going to get that, and I plan on having him go to the Manning Passing Academy.
Good stuff.
So just to, and of course, me having a company, Conquer Sports, I already, deal with several other athletes that are high school kids that utilize our services in terms of recruiting and helping them out. So, man, I love it, Mr. Mike, broadcasting and watching these players develop from freshmen to seniors and turn into something great. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, the punters, the kickers, deep snappers, having, before I went independent, being a part of a network for almost 2 decades, that is one of the when you talk about rankings and recruit rankings, that's one of the groups that are very underserved by what's out there. And I think a lot of, people would defer to Chris Saylor and was it Rubio, and which is good. I know LSU would have those guys, I think, and maybe will still do it when they would have their little kicking portion of either Les Miles or now Ed Orgeron camps. But it's one of those deals where it's like you never really saw a kicker or a punter get anything higher than a 3-star or a deep snapper. And I'm like, look, if the number one, if the kid that's one of these gurus says is the number one kicker in the country, absolute, the pinnacle, the number one is nothing better than a 3-star. Well, let's just not rate them at all. Either that or we carve them out and give them legit rankings and just not include them in a recruiting class overall ranking for each school. If you want to do it that way. But I always thought those kids have never gotten their due when it comes to recruiting rankings across the country.
I think the same thing. If you're just tuning into Inside the Trenches, you're listening to Mike Scarborough. Make sure you're following him at Scarborough Mike on Instagram and Twitter, or check out TigerBait.com. Y'all make sure y'all go subscribe to TigerBait.com. All the information is the latest and greatest of the best SEC team in those LSU Tigers. Want to segue into a cat from down here, a young man, Edna Carr, 4-star, Tyge Hill, defensive tackle, committed to LSU. What you think about Tyge, man?
Man, he's arguably and probably is your number one defensive lineman in the state of Louisiana for the class of 22. About 6'3", 285, probably getting close to 290. Eats up a lot of space in there. You know all about that. He's got a quick first step, burst of speed, obviously on a fantastic football team in Carr. He's got his teammate Aaron Anderson, who I also love, the wide receiver that's committed to LSU. And, again, that's one of those deals where Ed Orgeron and the staff have done a fantastic job, Mickey Joseph in New Orleans. And, look, it's not too long ago and where defensive lineman was always a problem for LSU, not only because the state wouldn't produce them in numbers. There was a fight at one time to keep them home and then not go out of state. And that problem hasn't been a problem. Yeah, might you have some little gaps here and there where you don't have, you want 3 and there's only 1 or 2, and you have to go out of state and get 1. But LSU has fared very well getting, those top defensive linemen. And the one that they did lose to Alabama a few years ago after a year was in the transfer portal. So, Ed Orgeron's done a fantastic job holding on to defensive line. I think it helps that he's a defensive line coach himself. Christian Locouture is no longer in the program, but he has helped in recruiting. So, look, and I think Coach Carter now on the staff, the feedback that they're getting and we're getting, what the recruits think of him and their interaction with him so far, I don't see that stopping anytime soon.
That position.
Have you met him yet, by the way? Have you talked to Coach Carter? Have you met him yet?
I hadn't had a chance to meet him. I'll be out there for the spring game, so I plan on meeting the staff
Nice.
that I hadn't met. Um, but I wanted to mention you said a few things that really caught my attention. Uh, One was the actual absence of the defensive tackles, the high end D tackles, your premier interior guys to specify, going out of state, not going to an LSU. You and I talked about this since I entered with LSU Sports Network back in 2017. Each year, you're like, man, we're not getting any guys. The state looks like it's rough in that area. And then lo and behold, we look up and there's a Mason Smith and there's a Tigey Hill. So it's like, do you feel that position is coming back in state?
Yeah, and then the year before that, look what we're looking at now. Jaquelin Roy going into his second year.
Yep.
And Jacobian Guillory, who I keep listening to Orgeron. Usually, when he starts dropping names, it gives you a good idea. And I would like to hear him mention Jacobian Guillory's name a bit more, because I think the expectations were high from him coming out of Alexandria. And then of course they recruited Southern Mississippi. McKinley Jackson ended up at Texas A&M, but I think him and Jacobian were kind of a similar guy that year. 2 classes ago. So, and then you got another kid in South Mississippi that I think they want to be a part of this class, and Jaheim Otis, who I went and filmed last football season, which Mississippi went ahead and started their high school season just about on time. So I went and filmed several Mississippi games early last season, guys that LSU was recruiting, because Louisiana didn't start till the last weekend in September. Mm-hmm. So, look, you got Jamon Tapp over at Ascension Catholic, and others as well. So, and then I think defensive lineman hasn't been the problem. Offensive line was a problem. Well, now that's not a problem this year, because you've got Emory Jones and Catholic High, who we're waiting to find out what he's going to end up doing. You got Will Campbell already in the fold, a big offensive tackle from Neville. And then, I mentioned earlier, Bo Bordelon at Newman, who's like his daddy at that age, on the thin side, but, he's 6'5", 6'6", and, he'll be 290, 300 before you know it. But
him and his brother. I trained him this during the pandemic. I went out to Raceland on their facility, man, and trained them. They're going to be, both of them, tall, lengthy. Technique. Now, the younger brother's going to be a 9th grader, and they're saying that they might be bookends where Bo is at left tackle, and what is it, Brett? Brett, yeah, the younger
Brett
brother
will be right tackle. So, or I don't know, or when you saw him, do you think is he a right tackle at Newman, or is he maybe a guard? Or
he's long, but he's skinny. They're both skinny, but they both play offensive line. And even when we were training, because I was still training Bo as a DN too as well. I trained them both as DNs. And what I remember is, first and foremost, the oldest looked just like his mom. Boy, they split an image. Miss Borderline. They look just alike. But how he's built, man, he's built like a Watt. So he has that stature. I'm going to have to send you some pictures of us from the workout, and just some good kids, man, and have a lot of potential. And even with a lot of the kids that we have at Concord now, I'm starting to feel that comeback of interior linemen. It's a few kids that we have up front on the defensive line. A kid we have, Ronald Allen from Archbishop Shaw. He's a sophomore. Played a little bit last year, but Corona kind of hit him because they didn't even get a chance to make it to the playoffs. I'm gonna see some Russian film on him. Spectacular. It's a kid from St. Paul, Carnell Harris. His family's are Burris. I don't know if you remember Sean Burris, played quarterback at Grambling. Just an athletic kid, and I mean I can go down the line of Matthew Burnside. It's a core group of sophomores that we have. I have Archbishop Rummel.
St. Aug's got that big offensive lineman east.
Yes.
It's been a while since I've been to someone at St. Aug is kind of on the radar. So,
St. Aug is a little bit of Carr, because you have Coach Nick Foster, who was on the state championships, plural staffs at Carr. So that Catholic lead is starting to look like it was in the early 90s early 2000s when I played with Coach Hank Tierney. There you're starting to see that type of player coming back, particularly up front on the line.
I
have Archbishop Rummels' entire offensive line.
I still say St. Aug has the prettiest uniforms in Louisiana high school football.
Oh yeah, purple nice, baby. Yeah, I love it.
I
And
love
Leonard made
uniform.
that thing look good too, straight up.
Yeah, they had the helmet during the Fournette years, which was like the first throwback uniform, that old gold helmet.
Yeah.
Now they changed them recently, but I think they need to go back to that old gold that Fournette used to wear, that color helmet. But no, I love that. It's just a classy looking uniform at St. Aug.
It is a classy look. I want to ask you a question about the way you look at players for recruiting. Like, what would you say the 3 elements that you look at in a player? I know speed is somewhere in there, but what really stands out? Say, oh, hey, this guy here, this defensive tackle or this receiver stands out for these reasons when you're making your rankings and kind of looking at the players.
You know, there's sometimes where a guy will stand out and you really like what you see. But then, you know, there's maybe the measurables aren't there. I'll use Cardell Thomas as an example. Very dominant at the high school level, but one of the knocks on him, and people were talking about it, and kind of under their breath, or saying, "Yeah, but he's got short arms." Well, as a defensive lineman, if you're going up against an offensive guard type doesn't have the arm length, that can be a problem and stunt, how far they can actually go.
Right.
And so, as dominant as he was at the high school level, that was one of the things that people were guarding against, saying, is it going to translate to the next level? Because, when you measure his wingspan, what is it? Mm-hmm. And so that's one of the things you have to guard against. There can be some guys who look very dominant at the high school level, but do they have the measurables that are going to translate, or that's going to make them hit a ceiling once they get into a program where everybody there was as highly talented as they were out of high school? But, there's just some things that just are can't miss. When you see an Aaron Anderson does what he does at Carr after the catch, when you see a Walker Howard making all those throws as a ninth grader, and even though at the time he's 160, 65 pounds, it's so obvious when you see that kid in the ninth grade with that kind of velocity on a football, knowing that the weight is going to come. When you know what the height of his mom was, may she rest in peace, and the lineage of his father. The same thing with talking to Ben Bordelon about Bo, and Ben saying, I was that same weight, I was that same height at his age. In fact, he might be a little bit bigger than I was. It's all kind of things you just dig around. But there's some guys that are just, it's so obvious that it's a can't miss. But then you can also flip it around. I remember going to a combine, and at that same combine, you had Clyde Edwards-Helaire, who you took a picture of him and you saw him amongst the running back group, and you really didn't. You looked at him and said, "How you doing, Clyde?" But you were looking around, and because he didn't blow you away with his height, the way he looked, his 40 time wasn't going to blow you away at that time, or any of that. Mm-hmm. And then I see Jordan Jefferson, and they're like, "What are you doing here, Jordan?" "Oh, well, my little brother's here. He's a receiver, Justin."
Yeah.
And I went and looked at Justin. Okay, well, that's nice. Nobody paid him really any attention. And what do those two guys do? Both of them ended up being first-round draft picks, right?
That's
and
really for you.
Huh?
That's how it is in the booth, baby. You just never know.
So they make everybody look like idiots, and the thing is to admit it and laugh about it and enjoy it. Yeah. And admit where everybody made a mistake. But it's like, but think about what LSU did. First of all, it was, a legacy deal with Justin. But think about all the schools. Destrehan is a school that every college coach watches their film. Think about all the schools that didn't see what Justin Jefferson could be.
And I loved it, becoming a young broadcaster, just retiring from the AFL at the time, 2014, 2015. You had Jericho and Justin Jefferson on the sideline. Jordan Jefferson coaching for Destrehan. I'm watching Destrehan and John Eric play. It was so many stars on that one field. This was right. This was 2015 season, if I'm not mistaken. And I remember talking to Jordan about Justin after, like, man, he was getting off because he was making big plays. Reminds me a lot of my son right now. Like, he makes some decent plays for De La Salle, but the attention was just so on the running game. Gets to LSU, Justin ends up gray shirting, earns his keep. Now I'm in the office talking with Mickey Joseph right before the 2018 season. He's like, so Mickey, who's your starter and receiver? So in my mind, I'm thinking the Gills, guys who started last year. Oh, he said, number 1, number 2, and number 6. I'm like, wait, hold on. I know Justin the dog. I know he's good because Jordan, that's my little brother. But I met Jamar Chase, and his dad told me a while ago that I'm talking about he was a freshman in high school. I was going door-to-door cable. I just retired from football, and I knocked on Jamar Chase's door. I still talk to his dad to this day. Me and him talked yesterday.
I love his dad.
Oh, good dude, down there, remind me so much of my Paul. And he said, man, I'm telling you, come meet my son. Said he was gonna be big time. And when Mickey said that, I know Mickey. I've been knowing Mickey for 20 plus years since I was in 99, 2000, like juvenile, baby. And what I remember more than anything else was the look on his face when he said, now, coach, number 1, number 6 a dog, but number 1. And I knew right then and there, now this kid may be a top 5 pick in this month's draft. So I just think that it's a beautiful thing.
Well, Jamar was just one of those guys. It was obvious. But I remember seeing him going to, at Turling's, and he was just absolutely fantastic in a game there. And of course, this whole recruiting process was very, very unique because he obviously was not committed elsewhere, and it was a whole deal of just biding their time. LSU could, Ed Orgeron them continue to recruit him, staying on top of him, and sure enough, he flipped to LSU, and the rest is history. So, I think you watch all the talking heads talk about the draft and which receiver do you take first, and the debate over him or Devonta Smith, and I just think Jamar's body and that physicality of him, to me, he's a no-brainer. He's fantastic, and I don't think. And of course, we're kind of seeing it right now. Nobody is discounting him because he opted out last season. That's for sure.
Nobody's discounting. That's the main thing I see more than anything else. Hold on 1 second, Mr. Mike. I got the. If you just joined us on Inside the Trenches, took a little quick break, getting a little work done around the house, Mr. Mike. Mike. I keep on calling you Mr. Mike. I'm gonna fix that one day. Today's the day.
Whatever you want to do.
I'm getting so my studio. I have my back house studio, so they was doing some work around the house. They didn't know. So, perfect segue into my next question for you, and it's LSU Pro Day taking place this week. You've been around the program for years. So you know the guys that stand out, guys that may have potential. And I know sometimes it's hit or miss. But you have Torrey Carter, Jamar Chase, Jabril Cox, Terrence Marshall, Racy McMath, Tyler Shelvin, Jacoby Stevenson, Kerry Vinson, and Zach Von Rosenberg, punter. That's the guys participating in LSU's Pro Day this year. Now, I saw a couple of predictions. Of course, Jamar Chase, they're talking top 15. Of course, Kerry, I think I saw like second or third round. We talked about Tyler Shelvin earlier. Keep it inside the trenches. And of course, I want to hear about those other guys. I think Cox is another guy that might can go late first round, early second round, worst case scenario, third, from what he showed in the 1 year at LSU, he could play top Power 5 ball. But I want to stick with Tyler for a second. Where do you see a guy like him landing in this year's draft?
I think it's so important, I think, for him. Look, he's going to get drafted anywhere just because he's a guy, but, you know, what does he show up? You know, what kind of shape is he in? You know, I think he could do himself a world of good if he shows that, hey, yeah, he needs to show that, yeah, he opted out, but he kept working and he started preparing for his professional life. If he shows up in the best shape he's ever been in, then to me, that sends a statement to the NFL, hey, you know, this is a guy. And he might be able to improve himself a round or two higher where he would be otherwise because of it. So I don't know who he's been working with in the offseason. I don't know what he's been doing. I've heard, you know, bits and pieces and some of it contradicting each other. One person might say one. So to me, he's the story. I know what Jamar Chase can do. I know what Terrace Marshall can do. I think Jabril Cox is going to be fantastic. Zach Von Rosenberg we had here in the Tiger Bait studio a couple of months ago. Fantastic interview. But, you know, punter is such a position where, you know, you've got guys who are fantastic college punters that could be one of your top 2 or 3 punters in college football. But because, you know, NFL punters, the longevity of them in the NFL is so long, you got a backlog of punters who show up to camps every summer, and it's almost like they got to wait their turn. You know, is that going to be the situation for him? So, you know, obviously LSU is not going to top the draft they had last year as far as that amazing number and all the first round picks. But I think the pro day is going to be vitally important for several of those guys.
Correct. I think Tyler's a guy that could shock the world and go late first round, early second round because of the things you talked about, showing up in shape, how important that nose guard position is to the NFL, particularly with teams who run those 3-4 defenses or look for that solid nose guard. You look at a guy
and you know this too, Marlon. I don't know if you suffered from it. I doubt that you did, but there's no doubt in my mind that there's guys that were in the program when you were, fellow teammates, that when off the record conversations were being had with Tommy Moffitt or position coaches in the program. What kind of kid is this? Is he lazy? Does he do the work? Is he a self-starter? Do you have to stay on top of his ass to make him work? You know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
And those kind of interviews can really hurt a guy's draft stock when they start talking to coaches in the program. And so, you know, that's part of the thing with Tyler Shelvin. What are the LSU coaches in the building saying about Tyler Shelvin when those NFL scouts are calling and inquiring about him and asking what kind of kid is he? That stuff can really hurt a player. And, you know, and it's those guys' job too, because they're not going to sell a bill of goods. You know, those guys, LSU coaches and Alabama coaches, wherever, they've got to be brutally honest about their players or they won't be trusted. There's a trust factor that goes in there.
A huge trust factor. And I look at a situation like Tyler Shelvin. I didn't hear any bad thing about him, but I know that he came in heavy and he eventually lost the weight the national championship year. And you cut the tape on and see where he demands 2 or 3 blocks. And he's already wearing the 72. So he reminds me of my old teammate Glenn, just his movement and the type of impact he had. I was on team comeback year, that last year, this Corona year. I thought he should have came back. I thought it would have might have at least helped his stock some, if he came back. But how dominant he plays, his ability to really stop the run and have that lateral movement at that size. So I know off air you mentioned like 340, 345. I'm thinking 330, 335. Now you really like, oh man, and he's moving quicker. You'll have a team.
I don't know, when this airs, it might be after the pro day, but it's like, what I was telling you earlier, it's like, what kind of statement does he walk in the door? One of the first things they do is measure height and weight, right?
Correct.
Before you even get to work at pro day. What kind of statement does he send if he shows up at 340 versus 355? That 10 to 15 pound difference shows work ethic.
Tell me about it.
I mean, it basically says, hey, he wasn't on my, an NFL coach says, well, I'm not here looking, paying attention to him, but now I am going to pay attention, No,
that's true.
We'll see what he does.
And just to mention the other guys, I know Kerry Vincent, he has the speed. So worst case scenario, you'll go as a mid-rounder or get drafted somewhere because you can, just by nature, for the folks right now listening, by nature, you can do more. So if you're a fast defensive back, which I try to encourage all fast, skilled guys to play DB, you can play on all four of the special teams. You can start playing at least four positions, whether it's field side corner, boundary side, safety. You have all these different titles, nickelback, dime. You could get in more packages as opposed to guys like me and Tyler Shelvin. We had to knock it out the park as a nose guard. So that's the huge difference in positions for sure.
Yeah. Now, I started covering Tyler before he went to Notre Dame of Crowley. But, I covered him when he was at Northside. And who was the kid at Evangel that ended up being a defensive lineman that went to Notre Dame? Dog it. Shelvin ate him up. He didn't be a high round draft pick. And he was a kid that LSU really, really wanted.
Sound familiar. I can't think his name.
Yeah, you know what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
And then Tyler blew his knee out. But I always thought he was the most, and he was, of course, I'm talking about him as a sophomore at Northside and Lafayette. At the time, he was maybe 285, 290, because he's 15, 16-year-old.
Correct.
Blew his knee out. And so I think naturally the weight gain just from, coming off a knee injury. But the thing about Tyler is, I think at one point he might have gotten up to 370 something, in an off season at LSU.
Mm-hmm.
To me, the lighter he comes in, the better he's going to be and the most effective.
That's the best thing. I tell all young D tackles, just go in light, because one thing about us is it's easy to put the weight on. It's extremely hard to get it off. So if you can start losing those, at LSU, we used to do like the 3 pounds a week thing. Just try to lose 3 pounds a week. Try not to make super duper big gains, but give yourself a little time to.
The player I was talking about was Jerry Tillery.
Jerry Tillery. That's right. He did. What he ended up getting drafted? Yeah, I know Tillery.
He
fourth round or something. Mine slips me. I'll look it up.
Yeah, he was a first round draft pick. He was pick number 28.
Okay. Wow. Well, in that case, I was way off. Hello, somebody.
Okay, he was 2 years older than Tyler Shelvin. He was a senior and Shelvin was a sophomore at Northside. And Evangel came down to Lafayette and played. In fact, Trev Falk was the coach of Northside that year. Of course, now he's been at Lafayette Christian and won a bunch of championships. But Shelvin ate Tillery up, who ended up becoming a first-round draft pick. Tillery at the time
Louisiana.
Tillery projected as an offensive lineman at the time. Of course, ended up being a defensive tackle at Notre Dame.
Insane. Before we let you go, I want to talk to you about the current LSU team, where the team is now. They had guys like Sage Ryan come in. We talked about our guy from Thibodeau, Mason Smith. LSU now, we had a 5-5 season last year. Coming off of that season, we got some guys back. We have some new guys coming in. Where do you see this LSU team? What guys stand out? Any of these freshmen coming and making an immediate impact?
Yeah, the media, we get one practice a week. And the first week I was there. Second week, last Thursday, it rained. And so they went indoors. And if they go indoors due to COVID, the media gets locked out. So our one day last week, we didn't get. So we're slated again Thursday this week. But the day I was out there, absolutely Mason Smith looks the part. Fantastic.
Good to hear.
So, I think he's going to be a player that has an impact. I really like Peyton Todd, the way he looks. Of course, he's a punter from West Monroe, freshman, heir apparent to Zach Von Rosenberg. If you saw West Monroe play, he was hurt last year, and he's 100% now. But he's a kid who played linebacker for West Monroe, and he was the punter. So LSU's punter, he's going to be a guy that can make a tackle and lay the wood on special teams after he punts the football. So, I think, look, LSU's got a veteran-laden team. So while there's going to be some guys, they mentioned Derek Davis, safety can be a big factor as a freshman there early. You're going to get Armani Goodwin and Corey Kiner running back to show up in June. I think Jack Besh is going to be a factor when he gets there. How will they utilize him in Jake Pete's new offense? There's talk of bulking him up and using him as a receiving tight end. I hope they don't put too much weight on him because I don't think he's going to be effective at 230. He's already a big kid at 212. I think I wouldn't want him to go over 220. I just don't. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't see it. But I think he's going to be a factor as a freshman. I love Savion Jones. I had him a little bit rated a little bit higher than Mason. He'll be there in June. But I think Mason will have an earlier impact than Savion. But 2 or 3 years from now, I think Savion Jones, the defensive end from St. James, is going to be one of them kids that could be a first-round draft pick 3 years from now. So,
shout out to Coach Rob out there in St. James. They won a state championship. Yeah,
I love St. James. That's one of my favorite trips. Super people. Coach Valdez. And then of course they got talent every year. They got Shaz Preston, wide receiver for the class of 22, that's got an LSU offer. Of course, his older brother's at Mississippi State. I think 5-5 last year. I think the 2 wins to end out kind of gave a little bit better taste in their mouth. Mm-hmm. Obviously, making changes at coaching spots, new coordinator and Pete's, and look, I think I will be shocked if LSU's less than 10-2. I don't even think 9-3 isn't even in my thought process with this team, unless they have a slew of injuries, which last year was a crazy year. Actually, I mean, I've never seen a year. Can you recall a year where the defensive back position had that kind of injuries, that many injuries at DB?
Not in my time, not in my broadcasting. No, like you had youngsters that wasn't even supposed to play that got back there, to your point. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, look, injuries happen at all positions, but to have that number at corner and safety in a single year, that was just crazy.
That was crazy.
But the schedule is favorable for LSU. You start with UCLA. I think LSU will be favored in every game except one. I think you got a great competition at quarterback, regardless of who it's going to be. I think they're in the catbird seats at that deal. I don't know how they play it. I almost wonder if they hope that there isn't a clear-cut number one coming out of spring, just so it helps them not have an issue where you got 1 or 2 upset quarterbacks who are tossing around their mind to hit the transfer portal. But I think regardless, I think there's 3 guys there that can all win you football games. If one guy falters, you bring in any of the other 2. And then you got the Nussmeier kid, who I think it's going to be a matter of time before he's put on the weight, and he's going to be where he needs you to be. And then at midterm, you're going to get Walker Howard. So the quarterback spot for the future is amazing at LSU. And then, class of 23, you got Arch Manning at Newman. You got Ricky Collins at Woodlawn, who I really like.
We talked about
and you got Eli Holstein at Zachary.
We talked about Kendrick Richardson at De La Salle, just linebacker coming up.
Linebacker for 23.
23, yeah.
Yep. One of my guys saw him in Dallas this past weekend at the combine up there, and said he's about 6'1", about 230.
Yeah, he's solid. Right at about 6 foot, knocking on 6 foot. Solid, wide like me up top, but can move.
Yeah.
So what? De La Salle.
So now what is he going to end up being if he's already at that size? Because he said, man, he's a big linebacker. What does he end up being by his senior year?
I think about maybe 235, maybe 6'1" solid. And I'm sorry, he's class of 24. You were rattling the 23, which those names were just
20, yeah.
Yeah, when you say Arch Manning, I'm like, oh yeah, that 23 class is something serious too. You have Harold Lawson. We train him over at Concord with Catholic High. It's some guys in that 23 or 24 class in state.
Yeah, but if he's that size for the class of 24, what's he going to be in 3 years?
Which, man, what, 245? I don't know. Some solid. I'm thinking.
I mean, I haven't seen his dad, I don't, or uncles or mom. I don't know, but if he's continued, he's going to keep growing. But man, that's big.
He's and it's no fat. Now here's the thing: his dad played football. His dad's big, but his mom is super small. Like she's like under 120 small. So it's that balance. You got the dad big like me, and then his mom's like a very petite woman. So it'll balance out with the kid. You see it, like, because he reminds me a lot of Clinton Sessions, the way he plays my teammate with the Colts. He's not the tallest linebacker, but like Gary Brackett, he's all over the place and he's on every play. He has the vertical. I'm telling you, it was really good to watch them play this year. And as I mentioned earlier, my son, a lot of times those guys will come running up to him on offense because, the defense was in such a pickle those last few games. They needed to get the punt out there. So that team, you got Kid Mackay. It's some ballers on that De La Salle team that now the head coach, Coach Graham over there. They had Coach Ryan Manata, who's at Jesuit now. But yeah, man, that's
I mean,
he's in the city.
It's like that's like the Jamie and Buxton at Thibodeau. He's a class of 23 that had an offer real early from LSU, and I didn't get to see him last year, but now he's grown into a defensive lineman. Probably going to be an inside kid. He's one that I'd like to see you work with and see what you think of him.
I look forward to it. Definitely shoot those guys over to me. Mike, before we let you go, anything you want our listeners to know?
Check us out at tigerbait.com. If you're an LSU fan, $1 gets you on the site to try us out for a week. I always tell everybody, when you subscribe, pick the annual package. You basically get 3 months a year for free when you do that. And check us out on our Facebook Live show. We go Facebook and YouTube. I want to get you in our studio here sometime when you're in town. And but we go Facebook Live on either Wednesday or Thursday nights. We're going to be live on Wednesday night this week because LSU baseball is starting their series with Vanderbilt on Thursday. But we go live at about 8 o'clock, and we have a great show on Facebook and YouTube. So go to Facebook, check us out on tigerbait.com, and we got it all for you. We got your spring football coverage. We got your football recruiting, basketball, baseball, basketball recruiting. We've got it all for you at tigerbait.com.
The man, the myth, Mike, man, tigerbait.com. Y'all check him out. Subscribe to tigerbait.com. If you want to be in the loop with LSU football, this is the guy. Also check him out on Twitter at Scarborough Mike. Mike, my Twitter, Big Fave 504, should be back in a little bit, but I've been having folks go to at @3_down_inches to follow me. I'll be posting this thing up. Thank you so much for coming on the show, my man.
Hey, anytime, man. I'm here for you. And I, like I said, I want to get you here in our new fancy Tiger Bait studio with my drum set looking right in front of me.
Ooh, I might have to come try them drums out in there too. I like to mess around with that music, Mike. Come on, man.
Come on in.
Well, that does it for another edition of Inside the Trenches. We want to take this time to thank God for waking us up this morning, baby. Secondly, we want to thank you, the listener, for tuning in, reposting, retweeting, sharing the show with a friend. It's greatly appreciated. We want to thank our guest, Mike Scarborough, for coming on the show. Y'all make sure y'all check him out at tigerbait.com. Great information on the Tigers. We want to thank all our sponsors for the show, all the support for the show as well. Concord Sports Pros, the NOLA Gold Rugby team. And hey, if you want to add to the content, if you have questions for me or Mike, y'all hit me up. Y'all make sure y'all hit me up, marlonfavorite.com. Drop your questions there. Get y'all all of that information. We want to thank the producers for the show, the music that y'all hear in the background as well. We appreciate them. I appreciate the family, friends, and all the support out there as well. And if you forgot anything we talked about today, remember this: God is love, baby. Peace.
Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Inside the Trenches with Marlon Favorite. Tweet your questions now to @BigFave504. Let's connect on Facebook, Marlon Favorite Senior, and Instagram, BigFave_D-line_guru. Check him out during the week on ESPN New Orleans 100.3 FM or Sports Hangover with Gus Kattengale on SoundCloud and also on the LSU Sports Network app. Remember, God is love.